Hello and welcome to Wrestling Top Tens. It's Tuesday, so it is 2 days after WrestleMania. So I thought I would kind of flip the script a little bit and talk about top 10 wrestling moments. If you're new to our channel or just found us, please like and subscribe and do all the things. Again, we are brought to you by 7pound.com, and again, this is kind of a new countdown that we're doing. Neither Steve or I have actually tackled this on the normal Monday morning countdown column here. But again, I'm looking at moments here, and when I mean WrestleMania moments, I mean something that is magical in itself and also something memorable 5 WrestleManias later. For example, I am contractually obligated to mention Ric Flair on every wrestling video. You won't see Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels on this list. Yes, the whole I Love You super kick was impressive at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, really didn't mean anything to either careers. If I ever come back and do a WrestleMania moments that didn't matter, it would be highly ranked up there. Because as we all know, Ric Flair didn't retire. He continued wrestling, unfortunately, years after that. It really didn't do anything for Shawn Michaels' career. It was lovely when it happened, but again, 5 WrestleManias later, did it really do anything? Did anybody really care later on? But when you're looking at some of the other moments on this list, they all matter something. 5 WrestleManias now. It's like, for example, when I give you a moment, you should pretty much instantly know what WrestleMania this was. How many of you, at the top of your head, know which super kick happened with Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair? How many of you know off the top of your head the Triple H versus Undertaker, where Undertaker dropped the elbow off the soundstage into the peanuts? Uh, the Raven almost running over the power cable at the Astrodome and almost cutting the power to the feed to the entire event. You know, those events are very nice in the moments, are very wow in the moments, but again, you do kind of after a couple of years. And again, there is another moment at that Astrodome show, which is very important, but also didn't make the list because I'm also not looking at best matches. This is completely different. You're not going to see Savage Steamboat on it because that match is excellent in its entirety, not one singular moment, not one holy crap. You're going to watch Joey Styles commentate Savage versus Steamboat. He may say, oh my God, 20 times, not just once where it really, really means something. You know, you look at excitable wrestling moments. You know, Mick Foley going off the cage. That's a once in a lifetime type event. You know, until somebody later on beats it into the ground. But enough with the prelims here. Let's get straight to the countdown here. Number 10, Macho Man winning the title. Again, you know which WrestleMania this is. This is our first instance of thinking that Hogan is going to pass the torch. This is a hero that we have basically seen grow up in the WWF. He wasn't like Hogan. He didn't start out basically winning the title, but we saw him come in. We saw him meet up with Elizabeth when he was doing his manager's trials. We saw him go through the Intercontinental Champion as you used to have to do. And we saw him defeat, one man gang. I go through all these, get beating down. He's changing his outfit for every match. He finally gets a hold of Ted DiBiase. He finally overcomes Andre the Giant, and he wins the title. And we're thinking that yes, WrestleMania, Hogan's door may have closed. Let the madness reign. And it is a if again, I'm looking at these. If you were a wrestling fan at the time, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. Those of us that were not a big Hogan fan, we loved the Macho Man. And it took him a year to actually beat down the Macho Man where we didn't care about him as much anymore. And as things will develop, we never stopped caring about the Macho Man because his run to the title was that awesome. Number 9, we got Owen Hart staring down Bret Hart. Again, if you were a wrestling fan at the time, Owen beat Bret Hart earlier in the night. Bret Hart captures the title. The whole family comes in to celebrate the title win. It's a culmination of Bret's efforts. Again, we saw Bret Hart come in as next to nothing. We've seen him since WrestleMania 2, go through the tag team title and onwards and onwards. It's the greatest moment of his life. And there's his little brother who did beat him earlier tonight, just staring him down, just liquid evil in his eyes. It's a moment that if you were a wrestling fan at the time, it's very hard to forget. Again, didn't end up meaning as much as we thought it was going to mean because we really didn't get the program that we thought we would. Unfortunately, other people you know who you are, kind of snuck themselves into it. But again, that one moment, we just thought WrestleMania, the next year's WrestleMania, we may get Brett versus Owen with an Iron Man match. Oops. Number 8, Daniel Bryan. The whole, again, I mean, you'll kind of see a theme here, at least to these first couple ones. You get the entire build up into being a champion. Again, he's beat down. Again, he's this. Again, he's that. And it's one of the few occasions in modern WWE where the fans totally embrace somebody, and we didn't care what the powers that be said. We were making this guy a champion. We were putting him on top. And had he not got hurt, no telling how long he would have stayed on top. But he's still beloved, obviously. He's still a hero to millions, obviously. But this is the culmination of the SG. And those of you that watched it on TV or those who were there, it is definitely a heartbreak moment. Uh, Number 7, I'm going with Hogan Rock. Again, not the best match, but here you have two characters that, as much as I love Ric Flair, and again, I have to contractually mention him as often as possible, and this list is not fair to Flair, let's be honest with you. He's got to be doing something to make you care. Ric Flair is not the type of character that it can stand in the middle of the ring and do absolutely nothing for 5 minutes and have the crowd go utter apeshit. Hogan and Rock, probably better than anybody outside of possibly Austin, can do that. Rock and Hogan can both stand in the middle of the ring for 10 minutes, do absolutely nothing but look around, and the crowd just keep going nuts. Hogan has always been, I mean, you would almost think he grew up in Toronto the way the crowd there treats him. The Rock obviously belongs to the world just because of his personality. The two of them standing in Toronto, looking around at the ring, looking around at the fans, as every time one of them moves, it excites the crowd. And 2,000 miles away in the middle of Bumfuck, Texas, they're going just as nuts as the people in Toronto. It is an amazing moment just to watch the two of them, and you can almost have them think in the back of their mind, what in the hell is going on here? But it's a type of match where you have two of the most charismatic wrestlers in history looking at each other, looking at the crowd, thinking to themselves, whatever the hell we do is going to be a letdown from this very moment. And it's just, and if you're a wrestling fan of a certain age, when you remember back when, the shit was still real to us, it's an unreal moment to actually look at it and to look at their eyes. And it's just great camera work. But again, it's a highly memorable moment. Next up, the streak going over. Brock Lesnar being the one determined to win the Undertaker streak, which, to tell you the truth, if you really look at who all he faced, Snuka, Giant Gonzalez, Bundy, etc., it's not that really impressive. It's not like he was ever really on top up until, the midway through the streak. The first half of the streak really didn't matter. I mean, shoot, Edge has what, the second longest streak at this point, and nobody cares, up until they started talking about it. But the moment that he lost it again is one of the moments where everybody kind of lost their shit. Some deciding it was a great thing, some decided it was not a great thing. Others were just stunned that it happened and still can't talk about it. I mean, one guy was pretty much instantly a meme for the rest of his life. Next up, Swanton Bomb. You have a bit of a stuntman era in the WWF, and thankfully we moved out of it fairly quickly just because everybody kept topping themselves over and over again. It gets to a point where you're dropping off a 40-foot ladder, as JR likes to say, and it just becomes, instead of a moveset, it becomes stupidity. And yes, you had ladder matches. Yes, you had TLC. Yes, you had everything. But this is one moment where everybody just stopped and went, what the hell? And again, it's kind of like Mick Foley's fall through the cage. Once it's done, everybody else kind of looks at each other and going, "Okay, that's the best we've got." Sorry. And it was just an unreal moment, and thankfully, none of them, are in a wheelchair. Thank goodness. But again, it's one of the moments. Number 4, Hogan versus Warrior, the crisscross. Again, this is. We thought Hulkamania was over with Savage. Didn't happen. Hogan came back. Warrior was the next chosen one, and we all knew it. Let's face it, he'd never been a heel. He was brought in as a Superman. He was younger, he was faster, he was quicker. For all we knew, he may have been stronger. By this time, we'd seen Hogan for years. I mean, this was, over half a decade of the same Hogan match. Hogan matches the last 20% are the exact same match every time, from the day he beat the Iron Sheik to the day he finally retired in TNA. It was the exact same stinking match. The only thing that changed was the first 80% and the build up to the feud. Warrior at least would change. Warrior could be beaten. I mean, let's face it. I mean, he had been outsmarted by Bobby Heenan. He had lost to Rick Rude. He had been beaten down and stayed down. Whereas if you really look at Hogan's run, the only time he was ever really beaten down and stayed down is when Bundy and Morocco jumped him and splashed him, and Bundy splashed him to Kingdom Come before WrestleMania 2. Which again, if we ever did a top wrestling moments, is probably get an honorable mention for those of us watching what's our next main event. But Warrior had been shown to be human. Warrior had been shown to have to change stuff up to actually do something. At this time, he was still unreal. We didn't know what a real life prick he was. But this was the first time where Hogan very easily, wasn't 100% sure he was going to win as far as a main event Mania match. And, if Hogan lost, what happens? Because obviously you're going to get a return match, or excuse me, obviously we were not going to get a return match. This is a one-time ever, and it actually was as far as the WWF is concerned. But it was a moment where they did a crisscross and they showed that they were both equal in power. Nobody had ever done that to Hogan before. Nobody had done that to Warrior before. It was, as Gorilla kept yelling, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, and you just didn't know who was going to win, and you didn't know what was going to happen next. Again, retrospect does kind of dim it a bit, but at the time, it was an amazing moment that you just didn't know if this was the night that Hulkamania dies. You just didn't know if this was the moment where we knew we were going to get, those of us that didn't like Hogan, we're going to get stuck with him for another half decade of doing the same daggone stinking match. It was just amazing. Number 3, Hogan slams Andre. Let's face it, as far as an in-ring moment where it's just one epitome, again, those of us of a certain age, it's hard to explain to a newer fan just how unreal that was. No, Andre was not undefeated for 20 years. Hate to bust your bubble. No, Hillbilly Jim, there wasn't 93,000 people in the building, even though our own Steve Hall was in the building. Lucky turd. Uh, and no, this was not the first time Andre had ever been slammed. John Studd had slammed him. King Kong Bundy slammed him all over Texas. If you were a Mid-South fan whenever he ran his run. He'd been slammed in North Carolina. He'd been, every major giant slammed Andre the Giant. But the thing about it is Andre never stayed down. Andre never, shoot, Jerry Lawler slammed him, for goodness sakes. But it was never this impressive. It was never on this large of a scale. It was never this much of a build. And again, when you look back at Andre and his physical condition, had he been 10 years younger, this could have been it could have been an unreal feud. It could have been it could have ran for 3 years, to be quite honest with you. But Hogan slamming Andre was one of those moments that if you saw it live, either on closed caption, the nascent pay-per-view, or as Steve Hall, the lucky turd, saw it live, it's one of those moments that you'll never forget just because of the pure magnitude. And even though, yes, I was an Andre fan because I was a Heenan mark and I hated Hogan with a blinding passion, even then it was still a jump out of your seat. Holy crap! Because he'd done it once and just collapsed underneath Andre's weight. Number 2, Austin Brett, the double turn. Again, we're not looking at matches here. We're looking at moments, and it's that iconic where Austin's trying to get out of the sharpshooter. And again, newer fans, I can't really. You can watch the match and appreciate the magnitude. You can even say, "Oh yes, this is utterly amazing." The double turn, but that moment for a wrestling fan at that time, and again, old man, get off my porch here. At this time, submission moves were done for one of 3 things. Number 1, it was to get somebody to actually quit. That's your sharpshooter, that's your scorpion deathlock, that's your torture rack, etc., and so forth. When people tried to make wrestling real, this is when one guy was beat to a point where he was going to give up. Number 2, it was used to make somebody just submit in total exhaustion where they could barely move. Ric Flair's figure 4, for example. Again, take a drink. He would beat you down so much that your legs, you just couldn't move anymore, so you were counted for a pin. You didn't pass out. You were just hurt so bad that you just quit, basically. And number 3, it was used to basically soften you up for your finisher. Watch any Anderson tag team match. They just beat the snot out of your shoulder until a shoulder breaker basically made you quit right there when you were right after you took the move. This match, Austin was he did everything he could to tick Brett off, and Brett was going to do anything he could to prove he was a better man than Austin. Austin was beat so much that he could not move anymore, but he wasn't going to give Brett the satisfaction of actually tapping out. So he actually passed out from the pain. Again, at this time, that was almost unheard of. Brett was pushed too far. He was gone from honorable to actually willing to cripple another man. Austin was beaten so bad, but he wouldn't give Brett the satisfaction of saying, "Yes, you're better than me. I quit." Of course, the other famous "I quit" match, in my opinion, is Tully versus Magnum. And you look at how the psychology of that is versus psychology of this. It's next level, to be quite honest with you, just because of the motivations of the two men going into it. You go from utter hatred between the two of them, this is the only way to settle it, to one man's just going to show that the better man to the other, winning the match is secondary, and it ends up being. But you have this moment where Austin just has to die before you've got to kill him to stop him. Yeah, you could pin him because he's been beaten before, but you're not gonna prove he's not gonna admit you're better than he is. And unfortunately, WWE did kind of run this into the ground. I mean, shoot, when Sid Vicious is passing out because of the pain instead of tapping, you got problems. But this is, a sentimental moment, a sentimental image. If not for the PG era we're in now, the bloody face of Austin would probably still be all over wrestling today. Number one, there's no question it's Savage. After with Liz reuniting with Liz. Those of you that think this is not a soap opera with underwear, this is the penultimate here. Yes, you had plants in the crowd, which broke my little tiny heart when I found out that this wasn't all real. Yes, you had plants in the crowd crying, but you had enough people around them legitimately crying. Again, those of us of a certain age, we grew up with Macho Man and Liz. We grew up with watching how their interaction went. Behind the scenes, why this happened, it kind of makes you die a little bit inside if you really cared about these characters, if you really cared about these people and what happened going forward. But at that moment, it's one of those things where you're never going to forget it. And yeah, it should have gone on last, but egos are egos. But with what happened going forward, kind of does ding it a bit just because it didn't mean as much as we thought it was going to mean and ended up turning into two crappy angles that didn't go anywhere. But at that moment, all seemed right with the world because Liz was back with the Macho Man. Macho Man has the respect. And the two of them are going to ride off into the sunset and have 15 kids. And, in 20 years, we're going to have little Macho Mans running around the ring just running wrestling. None of them would look like Lenny Poffo. But that's my list. That's my top 10 WrestleMania moments. Did anything from this Sunday crack your top 10? Please let me know in the comments if there's anything in here that I missed or anything that you think should have been in here instead. By all means, drop all the hate mail to me. I'm sure Steve's going to yell about half of these. But what do you expect? I mean, at least Hogan's on the countdown, so he'll be happy. Shoot, the guy's on the countdown 3 times, to be quite honest with you. But y'all have a great Saturday. Hopefully this weekend I'll be back with another movie review. Again, like and subscribe, and have a great day.